Good morning and welcome to the County of Santa Clara's Housing, Land Use, Environment, and Transportation Committee, which is a standing committee of the Board of Supervisors. As most of you know, meeting was scheduled to commence this morning no earlier than 10 a.m., so we're going to get started. We just had some procedural issues that we needed to discuss first, and I think those are resolved. Let me acknowledge that the Vice Chair of the committee, Supervisor Wasserman, is here, so we do have a quorum, but let me also turn to my right and ask, starting with Parks and Recreation, ask the individuals on the dais to introduce themselves.
Don Roche, Interim Director, Parks and Recreation Department.
Joe Zintek, Director, Consumer and Environmental Protection Agency.
Hi, I'm Harry Freitas, Roads and Airports Department.
Kirk Gerard, Director of Planning and Development.
Sylvia Gallegos, Deputy County Executive.
Steve Mitra, Assistant County Counsel.
Okay, thank you for all of that. I think everyone can see the clerk's nameplate, so we're all introduced. If you need to refer to anyone specifically, now you know. We're going to go to public comment. Item 2, looks like we have one request to speak under that particular item. Public comment, of course, is reserved for opportunities to speak on items not on the agenda, but pertinent to the county's business. That said, we will call up Scott Largent. We do allow 3 minutes on this item when we have 5 or fewer speakers. Traditionally, we will allow 2 minutes on remaining items after we get beyond public comment. Scott, good morning.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Scott Largent. Kind of got to eat some crow this morning, and I need to apologize to you, Mike, regarding yesterday. I was a little confused who some of your staff were, and I believe it's Christine, and she's always been really good to me and always talked to me, and maybe there was just some misunderstanding up there the last couple of times I've been there. No matter whose staff she's worked for, she's always been good to me, and you in the hallway also. So Scott messed up bad on that one. Okay. Apologies set aside. I am just really frustrated about what's been happening with the arrest from San Jose Police Department. I'm just very, I don't know why they took out sections of police reports. I don't know how it was possible to rig a jury trial and not be able to address my accuser. I try to bring this stuff to the attention of people in power. I wonder why our county hasn't launched a civil grand jury investigation into the corruption that's happening in our court systems. And that's kind of why I've been going up there lately, talking to staff, and trying to light a fire. I'm just frustrated. I don't want people to keep losing their property. I'm very ashamed of the city of San Jose that they have rigged it, and it's very frustrating. They sent me in a lot of different directions, and then when they started to act like they really cared, and we were rolling out a complaint system, we were kind of holding the tow companies accountable, it was all smoke and mirrors. And when you've got chiefs and deputy chiefs, calling you and wishing you Merry Christmas and saying, it's fantastic that you've been sober so long, I thought these people actually cared, and they were setting me up to fail. And when you guys have an opportunity, I know you're very busy, I put all the chest cameras up from that arrest. I did email them to you guys. If you have the opportunity to watch them, it's just the one chest camera. And what they do is it just shows you what they were willing to do to silence me, what they were willing to do to apply bail, to keep me in the Santa Clara County Jail. And the reason I was bullhorning Garcia's window is he was not addressing my community complaints. And when I'd sit down with Chief Garcia, 90% of the time he's on his cell phone, he's not paying attention. I was kind of upset with that, and I kind of started throwing him under the bus at the city hall meetings. And then I started getting retaliated against from the security and the staff there. I took it out to the sidewalk out here, and then I just, basically ended up into a jury trial. Bless you, Mike. So I'm just wondering, how do we escalate stuff like this? How do we kind of get an investigation going? And I care about the homeless community. I don't want this stuff to happen like what happened to me. And I do appreciate you, Dave, being out there with your truck and helping everybody move that encampment. You busted your tail out there, and I do appreciate that. You're a hard worker. And it's good for people to see that out there, that people really care, and it's not just a dog and pony show to act like, hey, we're going to push them on down the street. You guys started getting some things done that the city of San Jose could not get done. So thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. It's good to see you out there too, Scott.
Thank you.
I think that concludes public comment. We'll move to item 3, which is a consent calendar and any changes to the committee's agenda. Supervisor Wasserman, recommendations?
Thank you, Chair Cortese. Yes, I'd recommend that we add items 6 and 9 to the consent calendar, which already includes items 10 through 13.
Yeah, that is agreeable. So we'll go 6, 9, 10 through 13 on consent as a unanimous vote or order today. Thank you for that, Supervisor Wasserman.
Yep.
We'll come back to item 4 then. Receive report from the Parks and Recreation Department relating to the Forest Health Plan for Mount Madonna County Park. Mr. Rocha?
Thank you. Staff will be giving a brief presentation report on the Mount Madonna Draft Forest Health Plan. It's our first one in the organization to address some of the diseased and health issues that we've been having at the park. As you recall, in the last 15 years, we've had to close our campgrounds twice during the summer months. So we're looking at how do we address that in the long term and build resiliency for our forest in the long term. So I'll have staff introduce themselves prior to them giving their presentation.
Jeremy Farr, Natural Resources Planner.
Scott Stevenson, Consulting Registered Professional Forester.
Good morning. Today we'll be presenting the findings and recommendations of the Mount Madonna County Park Forest Health Plan and answering any questions you may have. So as the title suggests, we're talking about forest conditions in Mount Madonna County Park. This is the second oldest park in our system. The first parcels were obtained in the 1920s. It's mostly a forested park, and it was logged as early as, or as late as the early 1900s. Our typical uses there are campgrounds or camping, hiking, and equestrian uses. And the logging in the 1900s in combination with limited historic wildfires has resulted in decades in some places of fuels on the forest floor that present a potential wildfire risk, as well as a forest health concern. The issue of forest health, as Don mentioned, first came up in 2002 and again in 2012 when we had to close campgrounds due to a significant amount of fallen trees and fallen limbs that posed a risk to public safety. As a result, we had to remove, in those two incidences, a total of about 1,200 trees. After we had the area evaluated by biologists and CAL FIRE forest specialists, and it was determined that naturally occurring mold and fungus were the cause of these tree failures, where the mold and fungus essentially eats the root zones or eats the tree from the inside out. In 2003, we implemented our tree safety program to address to reduce the risk to public safety in our use areas. However, since then, we've continued to see a decline in the forest throughout the park, and by that I mean we still see fallen tree limbs and fallen trees consistently throughout the year. The purpose of this plan is to create a resilient and sustainable forest for future generations by identifying the forest health issues that are currently present in the park, and then developing a long-term management plan which include general practices as well as specific project recommendations. The other focal point of this plan is to address the wildfire threat to parks infrastructure as well as the neighboring communities, and improving forest health in the long term by monitoring, removing hazards, and establishing best practices. So our assessments by our contracted forester revealed that the forest is overly dense or more dense than ideal conditions. The current conditions are indicative of a property that has been logged in the past without a transition out of that practice. The vast majority of pest and disease occurrences occur in the high use areas at the summit and around our campgrounds. This includes the area that is the site of the Henry Miller Historical Home. The pests and diseases present are naturally, for the most part, naturally occurring. There is a potential that we do have sudden oak death in the park. It has not been confirmed yet, but we do have a number of samples that were taken as part of this plan, as well as in coordination with CAL FIRE, to see if we can determine if it's actually present within our park. And the reason why this is an issue is that pests and disease result in increasing failures, and those trees that are currently infected have the potential to transmit that disease to other trees. Other findings, there are invasive species within the park, primarily eucalyptus and French broom. And as I said before, there is a significant wildfire potential due to the lack of historic fires and heavy fuel loads that are present, in addition to drought and impacts from climate change that we've seen in the past few years and would be expected to continue into the future. This is a map of the current vegetation. The darker areas are our conifer forests, so redwood, fir, and pine trees. The light green, as you get closer to the valley floor, are oak woodlands, and the brown and beige are chaparral and grasslands that are intermixed between open canopy areas. The forest plan recommends a number of practices and projects, and the highest priority ones are regarding wildfire. The establishment of fuel breaks is critical to fighting fire and disrupting fuels and the spread of fire throughout the park. In our case, we're looking at preserving the natural setting of our park, so we're looking at shaded fuel breaks where mature trees and the canopy are left intact, and the vegetation below is removed to prevent fire from spreading quickly on the ground. These will be done along our roads and around our campgrounds.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. On the before and after photos you have there, one pet peeve I have in a whole lot of places is where preventative measures like this are taken, and we have various restrictions as far as Roundup and what we can use on the product. Also seems to be restrictions on pre-emergence. And I know it's not easy to go through there and put down plastic, so nothing can grow up. But when I look at the before and after photos here, very similar to when I look at the area between my car and this door, it gets removed, it looks nice, it's safe, and 6 months later, the issue that was removed is back.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem like the right answer to me. The before and after that's shown in these two photos here, and I know we're just supposed to receive the report and I don't want to get into much detail, but it's just a personal pet peeve where we spend the time, money, and energy to correct a situation in your before photo, and if it were to stay like in your after photo, I'd feel better. But my feeling is 6 months, 12 months, it'll look like the before again. Can you respond to that briefly?
Yes, sir. This before and after, this after photo was about 4 weeks after we did this. This was actually done this year on a service road at Mount Madonna. In a redwood forest like this, you're typically going to see these ferns and other vegetation that's more shade tolerant. They tend to be less woody, and so there's less of a fire concern with it. And this wouldn't be done throughout the entire park. This is just around our roads. And our adaptive management for this plan would review how often this would need to be done. So in the case of your question, if we do this for a portion of the park and we have annual monitoring, if we find that we're doing this every single year, then that's something that we would potentially reconsider within our plan.
Okay, I'll be very brief with one last sentence, Chair. I would suggest whoever you contract with, whoever takes on this job, considers that concern.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any desire to bring in back a company every 1 to 2 years to do the same thing over again.
Yes.
And I don't know what's allowed by state. I don't know I know it's impractical to keep doing the same thing over and over again. In fact, I think that's the definition of insanity. So if you can just put a little footnote in there when you're looking out to sources as how to remedy an area. I recognize the problem. I'm glad you recognize the problem. I recognize how it should look. That's super. We can't be doing things over and over and over and over again everywhere. Our park system's too big. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, please proceed.
In addition to these shaded fuel breaks that we've been discussing, we would also be continuing to implement our defensible space around public use areas like campfire or campgrounds, barbecue pits, picnic areas, and buildings. The forest plan also recommends the reintroduction of prescribed burning into a naturally fire-adapted environment. This would be the start of this would be to restart our burn pile program. We historically had a area where we would collect all of the material from around the park into one central location and do a single day of one burn. This allows us to actually remove the fuels from the park instead of falling trees or chipping material where the material is still there and it still poses a fire risk. And once we would implement the burn pile program, as well as creating a network of shaded fuel breaks, the intent would be to coordinate with CAL FIRE to develop a vegetation management program and have broadcast burns in small areas within the park to reduce leaf litter and other fallen woody material that's collected over the decades. These prescribed fires would be slow moving, very low intensity. A lot of prep work goes into these actions, and establishing the shaded fuel breaks, removing material as much as possible, identifying species that we want to keep, and they're only done under optimal weather conditions, and permitting is required from the Air Quality District, and CAL FIRE does a CEQA analysis on the vegetation management program.
Can I just interrupt you there?
Yes, sir.
In this particular park, the broadcast burns, do you anticipate those being used frequently or on any kind of systematic approach? I get it about the pile burns, and I mean, it's very similar to an agricultural practice, which I'm a little bit more learned about. And I'm fine with that. And I'm not opposed to broadcast burns. I'm just wondering, this park's, I mean, the very reason you're in here is it's pretty dense, and I don't know if that's a safe and effective tool until you get things thinned out a little bit. What is your response to that?
There's a significant process to go through to evaluate these areas. We spend hours and hours with CAL FIRE looking at all of these areas, looking at the terrain, looking at the vegetation, looking at the fuels. We work with them to divide it up into manageable areas. This isn't, I'll say not every square inch of the park would be, prescribed fire would be applicable for. You have to consider the terrain and the risk that is there. We do prescribed burns at Grant County Park. That the entire park is not burned as well. So it'd be very careful planning on what's manageable, and those areas we could manage with prescribed fire in a much larger fashion, and the other areas we would have to manage by hand and with crews entering and exiting.
Yeah, I'm Grant, because it's over in my district, in my, kind of my daily transportation commute. I'm pretty aware of what goes on there. I think they're the pendulum, based on my layman's observation, is almost the other extreme, where it's the prescribed burns or the controlled burns seem to be oftentimes in open chaparral areas instead of in the parts of the park where, you've got a lot of fuel and maybe need to be thinned out a little bit more. Obviously, the burn pile process maybe is better for that. But again, this is much different topography, if you will, than Grant. So I was just kind of curious as to whether you guys were planning to get out there with CAL FIRE and just take on a multi-acre area with a broadcast burn. So you answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you. The forest plan also recommends removal of invasive species. Eucalyptus is one of the species that is specifically targeted because of its high flammability and its the leaching of chemicals from its bark and leaves that preclude other native species. And so this would reduce competition with the native species coming in. To address pest disease and the restoration of the redwood forest, we would continue to implement our tree safety program within the park areas. But however, outside, we would start looking at strategic removal of infected trees. As I said before, these standing dead and dying trees have the potential to continue to transmit disease. So removing them kind of reduces the chances that disease will be spread from tree to tree. After that removal of the dead and dying trees, there would likely be thinning, which is selective removal of redwood trees, fir trees, oak trees, in an effort to reduce the overall density of the forest and which in turn would reduce competition. And that reduction in competition is important because with competing for resources means that trees are more likely to be stressed out. And with climate change and more infrequent weather events and more intense weather events, reducing stress on trees is a very beneficial task to undertake. This is just a map of our proposed projects. The solid colors cover most of the park. These would be our selective thinning. The dotted lines would be the shaded fuel break network. The dark dots would be our defensible space, and the hashed lines are invasive species removal, and that's eucalyptus. As part of the public outreach for this plan, we presented to the Parks and Recreation Commission in May of 2018. We also held a stakeholder meeting, which was primarily attended by other agencies and the neighbors in July of 2018. And some of their issues and concerns and questions that they brought up were invasive species, climate change, prescribed fire, coordination with other agencies, and the availability of parks resources to implement this plan. And this plan gives us an opportunity to apply for grant funding because majority of the grants that are available require projects to be implemented that year. So by having this forest plan and projects in our queue, we can easily apply for these grants and leverage the funding that we do have available in our budget. Just in closing, the forest plan would protect our recreational amenities through the reduction in wildfire risk and the improvement in forest health. It will result in increased wildlife and plant diversity as we provide improved habitat. And the management of these projects requires no change in public use, and would only require temporary closures for the duration of a project. And then that's all I have, and so we can answer any questions.
Okay, any other questions, Supervisor?
I would just comment that I think it's a great idea, and I look forward to it being implemented as far as safety. We've had fires are increasing, acreages are burning, there's dead trees throughout. I think this is definitely something we need to do for public safety, and I applaud, encourage, and thank you to get it going. I don't know if you need a motion or not. Chair Cortese, if you do, I'll make a motion to receive the report.
I think we should, just to acknowledge the forwarding of the item to the Board of Supervisors, but it's otherwise a receive item, so I'll second that motion, and we'll move it along. I don't think we had public comments on this item, so yes, we will move on. Thank you. Thanks for the report. Item 5 is up next. This is the report on the Pilot Park Partner Program MOUs. Mr. Roja.
Thank you. Staff will be presenting a brief report on our new partnership program, just kind of to provide context. We're proposing to start a pilot program with MOUs with our partners, and so we can better engage our partners and plan projects out in a more collaborative fashion. So staff, they'll be introducing herself and then present that program.
Thank you. Welcome. Apparently not. Try again.
Is it on?
There
Okay,
you go.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, Supervisor Cortese, and good morning, Supervisor Wasserman. My name is Melissa Hippard. I am the Partnership and Revenue Development Manager for the Department of Parks and Recreation. I'm happy to be here today to present our new Park Partnership Program and our Park Partner Pilot Program. Oops. That jumped way ahead. Pardon me. Oh, no. My slides are out of order.
We're done. You're going to be a
I
hero.
know, right? Okay. Let's see if I can pull this together. Partnerships for Parks is a well-known and successful strategy for bringing more people and resources into parks. A strategic partnership approach facilitates aligning park services with community needs, greater leveraging of private investment, and increased public benefit. Our longest partnership has been with the community of Santa Clara County. In 1972, the county voted affirmatively for the creation of the Park Charter Fund. The voters have renewed their commitment 6 times since, and this partnership is the foundation upon which all our other partnerships are built. Since the adoption of the department's 2003 strategic plan, we have been striving to highlight and leverage partnership as a key strategy in meeting our mission. In that strategic plan, goal number 5 called for the department to engage all potential partners in implementing the Parks and Recreation System strategic plan. Most recently, the department's continued commitment to partnerships is seen in our 2018 strategic plan, which weaves partnership throughout as a key strategy in meeting all of our goals. I apologize, it's just moving really quickly. Huh. Oh dear. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead due to the slides. Again, I apologize. So the department is fortunate to have the Park Charter Fund provide consistent revenue for acquiring and developing and maintaining over 52,000 acres of parklands in Santa Clara County. However, as an aging system with growing capital and operating costs, it is imperative that the department seek compatible, creative, and innovative partnerships to secure new resources. Understanding what resources residents and visitors need and want from the county's regional park system was the focus of the strategic plan needs assessment. In addition, a park user intercept survey this summer provided additional insight into how people are currently using our parks and who they are. The department also desires to be responsive to market trends and public policy goals that relate to our parks. We are committed to traditional park uses and open to new ideas that meet our customer needs. Partnerships allow the department to enhance community engagement in park activities, projects, and programs, and key outcomes we expect from the partnership program are leveraging of broader than typical range of capital resources, especially philanthropy, leveraging of combined public and private sector expertise, broader and deeper community engagement, commitment, and support, and a creation of a more robust park system to meet the needs of current and future generations. The department's new partnership program vision sets the tone for how to engage with current and potential community partners. We want our partners to know that we strive to foster strong, impactful, and long-term relationships that are mutually beneficial. And we also want to ensure that partnerships do not create unmanageable risk or liability for the county. I've been working closely with County Council on the development of policy, processes, and tools to ensure that our vision works in practice. What makes the partnership program unique from what has been in place is the intention to be proactive, consistent, and transparent. The program is a bridge to connect what we want, in terms of like our strategic plan, with what people are willing to contribute. These goals guide the partnership program and are in sync with the strategic plan. In addition, the needs assessment of the strategic plan documented how the county population is growing and changing, and we want to encourage deeper connections with all parts of the Santa Clara County community. The department's approach to partnerships for the partnership program is focusing on volunteers and nonprofit organizations and community-based organizations, and it was a part of our overall partnership portfolio that really we see as an opportunity to improve and make more impactful. We have really good partnerships with public agencies, and we have very good partnerships with private businesses such as concessionaires, and we have good relationships with community organizations, but we haven't had a consistent internal and strategic approach. And so that's what this partnership program and these goals are about, is really about how do we better improve our relationships and leverage the community of support that's out there for the system. So we're investing in new tools to do this, to accomplish this, and I'm going to briefly touch on 3 of them and finish with the pilot program. So to move along to the new tools. Okay, I'm going to, again, I apologize for the slides being out of order. One of the new tools that the department has brought on, and I'm sure you're aware of the broad adoption of the Samaritan system, which we call SCC Volunteer. It's being used throughout the county, but it was piloted with the Parks Department, and it's just been a tremendous success. I oversee the volunteer program, and it's just been great. It's engaging more volunteers.
How many now are there?
Volunteers in the department?
On the park side, yeah.
Oh, at least 300, like on a long-term basis, and at least 1,000 per year when you bundle in when we do our special event, one-time only volunteers, or short-term.
Right. I recall Supervisor Wasserman and I hearing at one of the barbecues that they actually hit 2,000 one year. I don't remember what year that was. But
and as we continue to grow, the special events like at Marshall Cottle Park, Day on the Bay, et cetera, we're able to, again, more effectively manage volunteers. We can communicate more effectively what the actual job of the volunteer is we're looking for, so the match is better. So the software system has just been a huge success. It's reduced staff time. It used to be a paper process, so staff has more time to develop relationships, to think more strategically about how to use volunteers in the parks. And so that's been an important sort of business process improvement, as well as just, I think, a pleasant change for everyone. So that's one of the new tools sort of in this partnership direction. Another one is we're experimenting with new ways to engage people in our parks. I doubt this slide's going to be up there. You may have it. No, okay. Special events. So I mentioned Marshall Cottle Park, the 2 events that happened there. We have the Amazing Race at Hellier now. We do our Parks for Life Challenge in Pixon Parks. We have social media online activities. And we're using a new marketing plan adopted by the board in 2017 for the use in 2018 to really work with local businesses to develop sponsorships of these events. And this reduces the impact on the Park Charter Fund, so we can allocate those funds elsewhere, so that we can just have prizes for some of the contests at these various special events. And so it's a way to work with mission-aligned local businesses, and it's, again, one of those sort of areas we're exploring how to build relationships throughout the community to see where there is these sort of shared goals to deliver programs, activities, encourage new people into the parks, right? So we're really trying to find ways to reach deeper and further into the community to understand how people want to spend time in the parks and how we can get public benefit, at a reasonable, in a reasonable way, whether it's, small sponsorships or, voluntary activity. But the main and most innovative approach, it is this Park Partner Pilot Program. So I've been working on this with the County Council for the last year. This new tool is our most innovative to date, and it has the potential to be a real game changer for us. It replaces our Friends of Agreement. So the Park Department has had a Friends of Agreement that's been a very simple relationship sort of document, but we really wanted to become, again, more strategic and look for bigger, more strategic ways to impact serving the public. And so it gives us the ability to be proactive and have greater control in the development and management of partnerships with nonprofit organizations. It offers a clear path for potential partners, parameters for the relationship, guidance for shared roles and responsibilities, and integration into the department and county policy framework. So the Park Partner Guideline document and the template memorandum of understanding then provides this framework that establishes expectations specific to each program or project that a park partner is involved in. So there are cases where the primary purpose of a park partner group is sorry, wrong one. Limit of the old process, and I mentioned the Friends of Agreement, was that it didn't address mutual benefit and the potential for reciprocal incentives such as the use of park facilities and amenities. In general, it was a very simple approach for less complex times. Today, the department needs to be able to address such issues as how to avoid conflict of interest situations in terms of members representing the nonprofit while on county property. We also need clear parameters for when cooperating associations offer public events in parks such as campfire programs, educational and recreation programs, or specific special events. So our previous system did not address cooperating association activities outside of county parks. So the department in the past has really had no oversight or input into the content of newsletters, membership meetings, website content. And so this new approach improves overall coordination, communication, and planning. So for those of you who are familiar, we have friends of groups like the New Almaden and Quicksilver County Park Association. We have the Friends of Santa Teresa Park, Friends of Grant Park, and they're all part of this. We've brought this through the Volunteer Coordinating Council. We're in conversation with everyone to explain kind of this, where we're going with this, and have a lot of support from our traditional volunteer leadership. And they understand why we're doing this. So this program I'm presenting to you today includes this template MOU, which is designed to facilitate multi-year collaboration focused on specific outcomes to achieve shared goals. We believe it is going to be a more strategic and rigorous approach. We think will be more impactful because there'll be front-end planning, less ad hoc, less reactiveness, more proactiveness, and being able to collaborate with organizations like NACWPA, Friends of the Santa Teresa Park, and other organizations that would like to work with us in a similar fashion. So there will be cases where the primary purpose for a park partner group would be fundraising, such as the newly formed Friends of Marshall Cottle Park. There are also going to be cases where a nonprofit organization has a broader mission that aligns with ours, and they undertake fundraising to implement a park program in our parks. So one example of what that could look like would be an organization we've been working with under the permit structure is Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful. So they're a wonderful organization working in parks up and down the Creekway and doing cleanups. They're also hosting BioBlitz events, which is bringing in the community to do a one-day, document every bug, bird, etc. And it's a great community builder and a great way to engage the broad community in these kinds of activities. And it's something that they can do. They have the expertise, and they raise money elsewhere, and they come and do the program in our parks. So working together closely with an organization like Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful, where we can plan down the road for additional activities such as BioBlitzes, is, again, the intent of this pilot program. So depending on the type of relationship and the activities intended, the terms and conditions of the MOU could be different. The template MOU attached to the program today is intended for park partner activities that do not involve the use of county property at all, and meaning on like as an office setting or something like that, and no collaborative fundraising. So this is a very simple first approach to just more of a planning, roles and responsibility document.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a technical question, and maybe council knows? The policy that we have now that restricts fundraising on county property, I notice here on this third bullet point, it says may require a Board of Supervisors approved marketing plan if you want to do fundraising on county property. I assume, well, shall I assume that something would come forward to the board that essentially modifies or suggests modification or amending the policy that we have now to make it clear that this kind of fundraising can occur? I'm not opposed to this. In fact, I'm frankly...
Well, you're definitely anticipating what about, I was just about to say.
Okay,
in
sorry.
specific,
I do
that's
that
not,
sometimes.
No need to apologize. I don't know if the county, wants to add anything, but where we would want to move into collaborative fundraising or they want to fundraise on our parks for us, we would absolutely come back with a marketing plan. But until, my understanding, working with county council, is that as long as they're not fundraising on our property, then we don't need a marketing plan. They don't need a marketing plan. But it would just be a straight donation to us. They raise somewhere. If that's what you're asking?
Yeah, it's sort of a separate issue, and I don't want to get you bogged down in it, but we put a lot of work into trying to amend the county policy to actually allow some fundraising, for example, on the plaza out here, because groups come in.
Oh, okay.
Also a kind of an open area type situation. And what I was actually pushing for something a little more expansive, a little more relaxed in terms of allowing 501c3s and so forth to, to work in certain areas. Obviously, you would restrict office space and things like that. But anyway, it's still fairly restrictive, is even after that effort. I think the plaza's the only place here, for example, the cafeteria, which is often, used for people. People often seek it to rent it for activities and such. Technically has never been approved, for example. So I'm not opposed to making modifications to it. I was just wondering if later that would be one of sort of the trailer items that would come forward, is, some clarity from the board that what you're describing can be done. I would agree if what you're saying is people who want to do their fundraising ahead of time and get sponsors and then just show up at the park to celebrate their success, doesn't, as I understand it, doesn't fall under that policy anyway. But it's still, that's pretty restrictive. I mean, if somebody wants to say, hey, put a few dollars in,
At a barbecue or something?
Yeah, in, sort of a pass the hat approach to support the event. There's no fee for the barbecue, but if you'd like to commit $10 to help cover costs, I mean, these are things that are absolutely restricted at this time, which to me seem like common sense approaches. So anyway, you answered my question. I just wanted to explore that a little bit with you. Thank you.
No, I actually, thank you. I really appreciate what you're saying. So in addition, we're going to be annually reporting on the activities of formal park partners that would be integrated both into the donations updates we do to the Board of Supervisors now, if there are donations involved, and then our annual volunteer program report at the Park and Rec Commission would report more on activities, program impacts, project impacts, that kind of thing. So we're trying to really expand how we think about what our partnerships in the community look like, and we're looking for these pathways where we can really highlight, elevate, right? What's really happening? It's just tremendous how much love and support for the park system there is in our community. So at this time, for the Partner Pilot Program, we are seeking a 5-year delegation of authority from the Board of Supervisors for the program MOU to allow us to be nimble in developing partnerships with community nonprofits. So, and as I mentioned, any MOUs in that pilot period that would involve more or less complex issues like fundraising, we would come back, right, with a specific ask. We want to sort of start simple and then build right from there and see what's working and what's not working. So I can't overstate how much potential I think there is in the relationships. Our longtime friends, as I mentioned, are a model for cooperating associations, and I think that there are lots more opportunities to find champions to work with us, and some are already there, and this would give us a more strategic way to work with them. So the new MOU can take an ad hoc partnership approach and make it more strategic and successful for the department. And we're eager to implement the Park Partner Pilot Project and monitor and evaluate it as it progresses. So if there are no substantive changes during the pilot program period, the department would likely return to the Board of Supervisors to seek a further delegation of authority. But as already mentioned, if there are any substantive changes, we would return here, and we would anything complex, we would definitely move back through to get good input. And so thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, a great report, and I do think it's a good idea. I would just say that there probably should be some annual reporting out probably of maybe just to the committee, as it gets forwarded to the board anyway as a committee report, but not when you're doing a 5-year delegation, not because anybody, I'm not unwilling to do that, or not because there's any distrust or anything like that, but just so that the board is aware, future board members are aware of, you know, the great, what will presumably will be the great partnerships that you're developing. So, and the public. I mean, if you just, there's a report that comes in and just says, even on consent, the annual report of partnerships established under this program, you know, includes the following bullet points.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of 501c3s or a whole bunch of whatever, you know, relationships as per this new MOU process. I think it's really good information to get out. So it's just not sort of a secret until the end of the 5-year delegation when you come back for the next round. You know, that's the only comment I have. And maybe be prepared. This is going to the board, as I understand it, right? Just maybe be prepared to suggest something like that.
Okay.
There as part of the proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Wasserman?
I just want to say thanks for finding more ways for all the public that loves our parks to be more involved, more supportive, more contributing more. It amazes me. I think every time it comes up on the ballot, it gets the highest percentage of approval in the 70–80% range, something like that. So I'm very much in support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we unanimously received the report with the understanding it's going forward to the Board of Supervisors without any modifications or suggestions on our part for changes. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I didn't mention earlier, probably should have, when we were dealing with changes to the committee's agenda, that the administration, as noted on the published agenda, requested item 7 be held until October 18th. So that's the status of that item, and I apologize if there is anyone that was waiting or listening for that item to come up. It'll be heard next month. Item 8 is, as noted, under advisement from August 16, 2018, receiving the report from the Office of County Executive relating to an affordable housing impact fee ordinance and resolution, and an inclusionary zoning ordinance from the Stanford University Community Plan area, and requesting us to forward a favorable recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to adopt the ordinances and the resolution. So I understand there'll be a staff PowerPoint presentation, an opportunity for us to ask questions. We'll have public comment. I should note for other members of the public that representatives from Stanford that will speak under public comment had earlier done their due diligence in terms of requesting the opportunity to utilize some audio visual, so they'll have a presentation that'll be divided up per a 2-minute time limit. So if there's anyone else who wants to comment who's not from Stanford under this item, you'll also have the same 2 minutes per person. We'll get to that you know, in due course here. So welcome. And Sylvia, did you want to introduce the item and the panelists?
If I may, Sylvia Gallegos, Deputy County Executive, and I did want to start by introducing the staff. We have Kurt Gerard, our Director of Planning and Development, and at the staff table we have Elizabeth Pianka, who's our lead Deputy County Counsel. She is the lead of the General Government section, and to her right is Jeff Bradley, who is of M Group and is a consultant to us on a variety of projects within the department. And then to his right is Libby Seifel, who is with Seifel Consulting. They specialize in economics, real estate, and housing consultant work. And the county has recently hired her to assist us with a few matters, including the development of these ordinances. And then to her right is David Dozema, who is the principal author of the Nexus study that the board has considered on several occasions. What I'd like to do is take a moment to set the table. As you described, we have before the committee a draft housing impact ordinance that's been significantly revised from a version that you saw previously. In addition, we have the housing impact fee resolution that supports that. And then secondarily, we have an inclusionary zoning ordinance in draft form And then lastly, we've attached a supplement to the Affordable Housing Nexus studies that have been previously presented to both the committee and the board. You will recall, and I would like to take a moment to describe some of the major milestones leading up to this moment, that back in October of 2015, the board did consider recommendations to the Homeless and Housing Task Force, and one of them was to undertake a nexus study and do so with the County of Alameda and cities within this county so that we could advance the regional response to the affordability crisis. And I'm going to cite a couple of statistics that are well known to you, but I want to establish them for the public record. As we noted in the report, there was one study that was done in 2015 by the Harvard Joint Center, which looked at about 100 metropolitan areas. And in our metropolitan area, including Palo Alto, what they found was approximately 22% of households could afford a median-priced home, and then only 12% of renters could afford a median-priced home in this region. And so one of the results is, in fact, the number of unhoused people we have in Santa Clara County on any given night, which you all know can range above 7,000. And we have, immediate crises, including trying to find a place to put Hope Village. And, our organization has done a lot of work to try and expedite that so they can have a safe and secure location. And really all of this that I'm describing is the result of a decades-long jobs housing imbalance, where the jobs generated in this region well exceed the housing production in that same time period. So as I said, back in October 2015, the Homeless and Housing Task Force did make this recommendation. We did come back with a report on June 20th, 2017. At that time, the board did direct us to do outreach, to do a supplemental report that covered the Stanford Community Plan area, and to come back with the results of that effort. And so on May 1st and May 8th, the board did consider a draft housing impact ordinance, and you gave us several pieces of direction. Specifically, we had recommended and the board approved that, in fact, we tackle these housing impact fees in phases, that this was a significant lift for the organization. And so we had recommended and the board approved, starting with the Stanford Community Plan area. And as we stated at that time, we do plan to come back in 2019 with ordinances that would apply both for non-residential and residential development in the other areas of the unincorporated county in 2019. We did, in fact, go to both the Finance Committee and Hewlett to receive more input, and certainly we have been engaged in a number of conversations with stakeholders with respect to these two ordinances. And so they are significantly changed from the original recommendations and draft ordinances that were presented to both the committees and the board. So with that overview, I'm going to ask Mr. Bradley to continue with the presentation and describe the specific key changes we've made to these ordinances.
Thank you. Jeff Bradley with M Group. I'd like to give a quick summary, as mentioned. The draft housing mitigation impact fee ordinance has been revised based on previous review and input by both the Finance, Government, and Operations Committee, as well as the Planning Commission. Excuse me, the Planning Commission didn't review this. They reviewed the inclusionary, which we'll get to next. The proposed fee for development of academic space recommendation has been reduced from the previous number of just over $143 per square foot to $68.50 per square foot. This is based on the countywide nexus analysis rather than the previous analysis of the 6-mile radius. The $68.50 amount ties into the subsidy funding required to serve the extremely low income, the very low income, and the low income categories, but would be used to support the creation of affordable housing at all 4 income levels, including moderate income, which goes from 80% of area median income all the way up to 120% households. It is important to note, however, that the fee level is set as recommended, only captures 60% of the housing need as identified in the Nexus study. The funding generated by this impact fee would provide first priority to projects within a 6-mile radius of the community plan area. However, second priority would be provided to projects outside of that 6-mile area, but within Santa Clara County. The operative date was revised to be July 1st, 2019, to allow for plenty of time to both phase in the fee and there would be a 2-year phase-in period. The first year, the fee would be $36.22 per square foot, which is the current fee in effect under the 2000 GUP. The fee after the second year going forward would rise to the $68.50 level and would be annually adjusted for inflation thereafter. Another topic that was addressed was the length of the affordability restrictions. Previously was a 99-year restriction. That was revised to 55 years to be in alignment with the most common tax-exempt funding sources. Another change was to develop a mechanism to ensure that in the unlikely possibility that excess fees were generated, there would be a mechanism for an audit and a reporting and refunding of fees if necessary. A lot of thought was given to an incentive to allow for the building of units over collecting fees, which is provided by the inclusion of a credit formula that provides up to 100% credit of the housing impact fees based on the provision of affordable housing at any of the 4 income levels, ranging from extremely low income to moderate income. I would like to make a correction for the record on that topic. On page 9 of the staff report, in the 3rd paragraph, the fee reduction amounts would be $295,000 for the example unit given, a single very low income unit, in both years rather than the 2 different amounts shown. The fee credit table below that paragraph is correct. I'm now going to switch over to the inclusionary housing ordinance revisions from the last time it was looked at by the Hewlett Committee. The draft ordinance reflects changes so that both the on-site and the off-site inclusionary requirements are both 16%. Further revision to this section was made following the Planning Commission's consideration of the ordinance last month to clarify that the Planning Commission's discussion that if inclusionary units are constructed off-site, they may be constructed at the same percentage as on-site. And to align the 2 draft ordinances, the affordability restrictions were also reduced from 99 years to 55 years for the inclusionary. The operative date was also set to July 1st to allow for preparation of the inclusionary housing guidelines that would contain many of the operational and administrative details of the program. Additional change was that duplexes were specifically called out as exempt within the ordinance, and a revision to section D3 relating to projects deemed complete prior to the operative date. A clarification was also made to make it clear that a fraction of a unit resulting in the calculations could be banked or set aside and then provided as a subsequent project. That concludes the summary of the major revisions made to the ordinance, and the team is available for any questions. Thank you.
Questions or comments, Supervisor Wasserman? Okay, we'll go directly to speakers then, and why don't I call up Jessica Von Burke and Catherine Palter from Stanford. Again, as I understand it, you want a couple minutes each to present your overview. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Jessica Von Bork, the Director of Land Use at Stanford University. It's my pleasure to speak before you today, and thank you very much for accommodating our presentation format. We appreciate that. First, I'd like to walk you through recent county recommendations that have gotten us to where we are today. What we heard from the Board of Supervisors is that the delivery of units was to be prioritized over paying a fee, and that the board also expressed interest in solutions and wasn't necessarily wedded to ordinances as the mechanism. As you remember, in June, you gave direction to staff to begin negotiations with Stanford about a development agreement. And in August, the Planning Commission considered just the inclusionary ordinance. They voted unanimously to forward an unfavorable recommendation to the board, and their concerns were that this felt rushed because there really was no urgency. As planners, they wanted to understand the comprehensive package to address affordable housing and not get locked into a single mechanism prematurely. They also believe the package should be developed in a comprehensive manner with Stanford, and we couldn't agree more. Therefore, we're asking you today, and we intend to ask the Board of Supervisors next week, to table the consideration of Stanford-only ordinances, to formally authorize development agreement negotiations and processes, and to bring back a negotiated development agreement as part of the 2018 general use permit for consideration. So today we're here talking about affordable housing. And as a reminder, Stanford is the largest affordable housing provider in the county. Since 2000, we've built 1,011 units under our current general use permit and 90% of those are affordable. Also, we have under construction currently a total of 1,300 new units, and they're all affordable. In 2 years, over 2,400 graduate students will occupy these units and therefore free up affordable housing stock in surrounding communities.
You'll have to hand it off to the next speaker.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Catherine Palter with Stanford Planning. 8 weeks ago, Stanford submitted a proposal to deliver affordable housing units quickly to address the demand that will be generated over the next 17 years. We are using 3 mechanisms in our proposal. The first is front-loading creation of 100 new BMR units for our workforce on Stanford land. Secondly, Stanford will provide the county $14.3 million as soon as the permit is approved to support 38 ELI units. Finally, we will immediately create an evergreen fund of $21.7 million. We guarantee that fund will provide 217 low and very low affordable units. And we anticipate the fund will provide double the guaranteed amount. As the loans for the initial units are repaid, the recycled money will create yet more units. Finally, we believe that this fund will be attractive to other nonprofits and foundations that wish to support affordable housing. Their investment in the fund will result in even more housing. We are here today to discuss proposed ordinances. We have provided significant objections over the last 5 months. First and foremost, it is not appropriate to use legislative powers in an action toward a single landowner. The fee, even at $68 a square foot, is not supported by evidence and is not consistent with surrounding jurisdictions. We believe that a development agreement is the only way to deliver affordable housing units in an expedited manner. In December, the Planning Commission and the public will receive a staff report that considers all aspects of project approval. In order to have a transparent and comprehensive process, a preliminary development agreement needs to be part of that decision-making packet. We do not understand the false urgency with approving ordinances now. They will not even become effective until July of next year and would apply to our development, which won't be approved before April. Instead, we think put our efforts into providing affordable housing now, and that's why we ask you to accelerate the development agreement discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and appreciate you abiding within the time limits. Arthur Keller wanted to speak also. Please come up.
Thank you very much. Stanford University first tried to get 1.6 units of credit because they said that they are not eligible for tax credit financing. I have a document I'm going to enter into the record, an article from the Mercury News showing that they did get tax credit financing for the Stanford built Mayfield Place project on El Camino Real. They then want to convert existing housing on Stanford West to affordable housing. That just involves lowering the rent on existing built housing, displacing people who are already living there to move elsewhere. So I think that that may be a temporary measure, but it shouldn't be a permanent measure. What we need to do is realize that Stanford University itself actually has more than 3 workers for every employed resident. Now, they're trying to say that student housing is affordable housing, but that they need to house their own students anyway. Student housing should not be the same thing as affordable housing. The issue is that that doesn't take into account low-income workers like janitors, food service workers, and people like that who are providing service to the university. We shouldn't consider student housing as low-income housing. Stanford, they're not under the federal law. Student housing students are not considered employed residents, and therefore providing housing for them doesn't really address the housing crunch that Stanford is providing. We're having workers commute from all over. Finally, let me consider that Stanford is basically taking into account that people will commute on Caltrain. Caltrain is full. And the workers that take Caltrain are coming from too far away, and the hours are not sufficient in terms of for Caltrain, because people typically work off hours. So we have to consider that Caltrain, even in the future, is not sufficient for bringing workers into Stanford. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you to all the public speakers. We'll come back to the board questions or committee questions and comments now before concluding the item. Supervisor Wasserman?
I just wanted to ask if staff had finished their presentation, Supervisor.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I was told they went to Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. My concern overall is that affordable housing be provided. That's what I think we're trying to work on, a way of doing that. And we talk about development agreements, we talk about ordinances. I trust our planning department and county council, the importance of an ordinance. I'm also interested in a development agreement. But what I'm looking for at the end of the day is the county has changed. And we all know we have a housing crisis. That's not being debated. What is being discussed and argued about is how we help fund, how we provide that. And I think what's happening on a city level, a county level, states getting involved, is that as developments go up, we have to realize that creates the need for more low-income jobs to service and maintain. So the whole issue for me is, what's a fair, reasonable way for developments to provide housing for the jobs that they're creating? We can't undo things, as was said about a number of different cities, and I won't name any one city, but a whole lot of cities, I think, lacked planning. And they allowed development of offices and didn't think about the housing need for those individuals. So we've got a problem. The recommendation is that we forward, Supervisor Cortese, the ordinances, adopt the ordinances and approve the resolution to the board for yet more discussion. And I know that discussion will be robust. I'm sure there will be some discussions in between this meeting and that meeting. But at the end of the day, I like the changes, if I may, through the chair, to Sylvia that you brought up, and Jeff that you brought up in your report. The change that have taken place. I thought the first draft, if you will, that came this way was a big change from where we are to where we wanted to get. And I applaud you and all those involved for the compromise measures that are before our consideration today that's being proposed in the ordinance. So I think we're pretty darn close to being where we need to be. I appreciate the individuals that come forward with different opinions. I've heard repeatedly issues that the student housing not be considered affordable housing, that the student housing serves the students for the school and does not, in fact, provide housing for the support, if you will, for the infrastructure, the landscapers, the service people, the lower income jobs that are there that need lower cost housing. It's not an easy problem, and there certainly is not an easy solution. I think we're headed towards one. And Sylvia, I appreciate this has been going on for a couple 3 years now. And I think we're getting to a place that there'll be support for. So thank you all for your presentation. Thank you all for your work. There's a lot of different ways of looking at this. At this point, Supervisor, I think I'm in favor of moving things forward to get to a public discussion with all 5 board members at the board level, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Supervisor Wasserman. Certainly respect your comments. I'm not going to support forwarding a favorable recommendation to the board. I know we don't need to forward the item to the board because it's already on the board agenda Tuesday, so it was sort of a timing issue with this committee. Obviously,
that's true.
That oftentimes, like on previous items that we heard today, we would, sort of get a chance to hear it first, write a committee report, submit to the board, and all of that would come to the board subject to our recommendation. So I think our recommendation is sort of a moot point one way or the other right now, given that this robust discussion is going to happen on the board. Administration's put it on the agenda, and that date has been set as a date certain now. So I won't support a motion for a favorable recommendation on principle, but also because I think it's premature for us to actually adopt an affordable housing impact mitigation fee and inclusionary housing zoning ordinance. That doesn't mean I don't like what's here. I think if we're going to do an ordinance, this is probably going to be what we end up with. I appreciate very much that staff has submitted to us changes, and of course those changes will be equally submitted to the Board of Supervisors Tuesday. So meaning that I appreciate that this has all been updated, that you explain those updates to us. And in addition to that, I'm very appreciative of the fact that this is sunshined, that I think in a very appropriate way, the county, in the largest sense of the word, has put out what it feels is the bottom line here going forward in terms of adoption of ordinances. And I think that's really important. I think it's really important for Stanford to know as well. So why do I think it's premature, or what do I not agree with? Well, we had a discussion last time around about wanting, a progress report on development agreement discussions or negotiations. We really didn't get that from the administration separately today or as part of this packet. Whatever would have been appropriate would have been fine for, with me. Stanford has certainly made it clear that they've submitted something. So they've hit the ball over the net, and we don't really know what's happened in terms of the ball. It hasn't been hit back, or what's happened there. So I did put a referral, just as an aside, I put a referral on Tuesday's agenda asking the board to support an even more formal direction than this committee gave to engage in those development agreement negotiations or discussions in good faith. Obviously, there's more process that was outlined here that's got to take place later in the year. So what I don't agree with is, and I'll make this clear again Tuesday, actually taking the action to adopt the ordinances. I actually think whether I agree with anything else Stanford is saying, that this item, sunshined as it is, clear as it is, I think they probably have no misunderstandings about what staff is recommending or what the board would likely to approve in ordinances be tabled until the development agreement or other negotiations and discussions are concluded. We have time. And I think in the alternative, we would be sending a signal that, this is it, like it or not, and we're just going to move forward which I fear will send a message that we're actually intransigent in our position, even though we're willing to entertain, we say we're willing to entertain negotiations. It's just hard to live in both those worlds at the same time. So again, I'll be a little redundant in saying, all of that said, it's critical that Stanford know, what a development agreement would have to best, in terms of a benchmark. So I do appreciate all the work that's been done, and again, I appreciate that it's out in the public now, as to exactly where the county sits on at this particular point in time. One last thing I want to say, which I think is, it could be problematic in terms of development in any subsequent to whatever actions we take here as a board. If there are development agreement discussions, I think something that's got to be a little bit confusing at this point is what the board's priorities really are in terms of maximizing either housing, affordable housing in kind versus cash, such as this evergreen fee that the speakers were talking about today. And I think as long as we are not as a board, as policy folks saying what it is that we think we want there collectively, a mix or mitigation dollars or as much in kind as we can get, it's going to be really difficult for anybody on either side who's listening to our board to effectuate a successful negotiation. So for Supervisor Wasserman, I don't have any, on principle, I don't have any problem with essentially the I think you were quoted in here as kind of quoted in here as saying Supervisor Wasserman, I'm on page 2 of 12, by the way, of transmittal. Supervisor Wasserman indicated a preference for Stanford University to build affordable housing units rather than the county to collect an impact mitigation fee for new development. I didn't say that, so I'm not saying I win, you lose. I'm just saying if someone was listening to me and somebody's listening to you, and then they're out there trying to pin the tail on the donkey and figure out where that goes, how do they know? For example, I'd like to have a robust discussion about mitigation fees, how mitigation fees could be leveraged against Measure A, particularly if we're not going to have a 6-mile radius, Measure A being available to, in effect, all 15 cities and county unincorporated areas and so forth, and it's something we're trying to leverage 3 or 4 to 1. So I'm not clear if, at the end of the day, we get more leverage out of cash in the form of mitigation fees, given what we've already done as a county in terms of creating this big bucket of money that can be used for affordable housing, or do we get better leverage or immediacy or expediency, doing this preference for building units versus mitigation fees? I don't feel like I have that analysis laid out in such a way that from a business standpoint, I can say, wow, this is abundantly better than this, or it's a tie. I don't know how that lands, when you break it down and analyze it. And I think if we don't do that analysis and sort of share it publicly over and above what we're sharing here today publicly, the folks on the other side of negotiation aren't going to know either. If they're really, really motivated for some reason to do a development agreement, they would want to know where the argument is, where we think we get the most for our buck. And I just think that's just a piece of this that hasn't been, I can make some of these comments Tuesday and hope that the referral passes and hope that kind of work could get done. Sure. But I just wanted to let you know why I don't think we're ready for prime time on the ordinance, and maybe not yet prudent to adopt the ordinance while we're trying to have good faith discussions on these other possibilities. So I think where that leaves it is we would accept the report and
And that's
simply
it?
just.
It's already
indicate that
agendized.
We did not have an agreed upon recommendation going forward. Is that fair?
That's fine, and it's already agendized for Tuesday, as you said.
Yes, it is.
And for clarification on the bullet you're referring to, I like the idea of somebody coming forward and saying, we will build housing. I understand what you're saying about leveraging dollars. Right now, I feel pretty good about the dollars we have, but somebody who actually comes forward and says, we will build housing, if that's what you prefer, over dollars, and we will build that housing prior to our doing our project. And to me, that gets housing. So I think what you're hearing here is the expression from a couple of supervisors of things that are important to them, to Supervisor Cortese's point, whether that ends up being in an ordinance, a development agreement, or an ordinance and a development agreement. I don't know which road that'll go down, but I think you're getting some more feedback regarding this issue, and I think that will continue on Tuesday.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to try to make a few points on this today at the committee level and maybe foreshadow some of the discussion that'll happen on Tuesday. And thank you again to the three speakers who were here, and thank you to the panel. We're doing a very concise job of letting us know where the changes were in the ordinances. That concludes the item, and it concludes the meeting because we put item 9 on consent earlier today. So thank you all for being here, and we're concluded at about 11:32 a.m. So I want credit for that. No applause? Okay.